This is a hilarious reaction, which is that you're not going to find a nice discussion like we just had about incentives and what it all means. Over on cable, they're losing their minds, specifically over at MSNBC at these prospects. Let's take a listen.
The distinction that a lot of people miss, and that I think sometimes Elon Musk himself misses, is that the First Amendment protects against government censorship. It does not mean that private enterprises like Twitter cannot moderate, cannot have guardrails, as you say, cannot have safeguards.
Now, that's right. Look, the First Amendment safeguards us against government coming in to ban and punish our speech, particularly on ideological grounds. I think that's a very good thing. We could see how that power would be misused. If Donald Trump had had the power to punish and throw journalists in jail, I think there's every reason to believe he would have used it. He threatened people. He had them thrown out of rallies. And so we don't want to afford government with that power. When it comes to a social media platform that, as Elon says, is trying to create an environment for public discourse, a place where people of different ideological persuasions can come together and can reason. In order to do that, you need to create some parameters. We've learned that. Speech in Twitter is not the same as a town square. It's algorithmically driven. We've seen that falsehoods travel faster than the truth on Twitter, that polarization can be stoked, that it's a weaponization of human nature.
Weaponization of human nature from so-called, weaponization, why the First Amendment. I just never understand how you can't square the idea that powerful entities in general should not be able to control your speech.
Right.
If you can recognize it in the government, why would you want that in a corporation?
Right.
And
that applies to algorithm too.
It applies to everything.
She's not wrong to point out that some of the most pernicious parts of these platforms is the way that the algorithm suppresses some, elevates other. There are active choices being made about who gets heard and who doesn't get heard. Like, that is all extremely pernicious. But ultimately, I read her longer op-ed. I don't know if you read it. She and many others like her who, want to justify more censorship on these platforms than, than is permissible under the First Amendment. They reach for this very libertarian argument, basically like, well, they're companies. They can do what they want.
Right.
It's totally different. And it's like, well, if you acknowledge that this is really important for speech and this is the digital town square, then of course you should have the same First Amendment principles ultimately apply here. Now, it might not be like constitutionally mandated when you're talking about a public company, but that doesn't mean that the norms and what we should be striving for shouldn't be the same.
I completely agree. That is what we should be striving for. And at the end of the day, if Elon was actually able to accomplish that, I think it would be awesome. I just don't have a lot of faith. I just think it's going to be such a titanic task. So I always have to balance it on the one hand, look, he tried to back out of this for a reason, which is that it's not a good business decision. On the other, maybe it'd be a net social good, and then I have to separate with my schadenfreude of watching these folks, the Ben Collins and them of the world on television, just losing it at this prospect. And I've seen so many funny, just up to, they're like, oh my gosh, the idea, misinformation, propagating. They're like, what? The world's richest man propagating misinformation. I'm like, what if I told you that a lot of these billionaires are full of shit and are just like the rest of us?
Right.
They're just as fallible. So it's like, oh, well, this one is bad. No, how about we just say, in general, fallibility is part of the human condition. Let's just make it so that people have the ability to be fallible, whether you are the richest man or not the richest man in the world.
Well, that's the thing that's been funny to me. It's like, oh my God, now a billionaire controls our speech. It's like, what world do you think you're living in?
Correct.
Because that is the world we live in. Like, I would like to change that. It'd be great to have, more partners in wanting to change that. But I guess that's why the Elon Twitter story, I just have never been as invested in it as a lot of other people, because on one side you have people who are having that free, oh my God, a billionaire is going to control our speech, when you're like, they already do. On the other side, you have people who are big Elon stans and they think he's going to ride to the rescue and provide this, private billionaire solution to what is ultimately a collective societal problem. And obviously I don't buy into that either. So I've always just sort of had a wait and see and skeptical approach to this, because, as I said before, the incentives of the company are what they are. Whether it's Elon or anybody else who is at the helm, that is the model. It exists like that for a reason. Same reason like cable news is the trash that it is because of its business model. Like, those incentives are not really changing. So I'm skeptical that there's going to be massive transformational impacts, but I mostly have just a wait and see attitude.
I think that's correct.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.